by saying one thing. This is to all of the landlords on the call. I have received emails from several of you regarding that email that you get regarding your payments. It's something that Yardi is working on. We've put in multiple tickets. So I know that's a question that everybody has, but I wanted to throw that out there really quickly because I know probably some of you are going to put that in the chat that there's issues with that confirmation of payment email going out. So that is something that we are working to get taken care of. So we can start with the PowerPoint. So I'm going to briefly go over for some of the landlords that may be newer on here, kind of what DEHAP is. We'll kind of run through this really quickly because most of you that are on here because you've been working with the DEHAP program probably since 2020 or shortly thereafter. So DEHAP is basically the rental assistance program. The federal government, after the COVID-19 pandemic, recognized that tenants weren't able to pay rent because they weren't working, and landlords were suffering from this as well because obviously they needed tenants to be able to pay rent. So they sent money to each state. Our state was able to get quite a bit of money to assist with paying rents and utilities for tenants and landlords. They could have qualified for the program because they had a loss of income, they were taking a paid leave off, they had a reduction in hours, or some sort of financial hardship related to COVID-19. So what the program covers would be late rent payments, forward rent. So we'll pay in 3-month increments forward. So if you submitted an application and the rent was due for September, we would also be paying 3 months forward. We'll have a little bit of discussion about that towards the portal pause changes, and we'll discuss what the future rent looks like currently. We can also pay security deposits, utilities in up to $1,500 per month, late fees, and court fees. A lot of landlords that are on here, I've had conversations specifically with our larger landlords that weren't aware that the program does pay for security deposits. So we can talk about that a little bit further on in the presentation. But if you have a potential tenant that stops in and you qualify them for a unit, and specifically because you're having, usually a 2-month wait or longer to get into that unit, that would allow us time to review the case and get them approved for security deposit and those first 3 months of rent. Regarding the rent, currently we pay a maximum of $2,000 per month, and we'll pay up to 18 months of rent. So the eligibility for tenants is, as I discussed earlier, 1 or more individuals who qualified for unemployment or experience a reduction in income. They have to be at risk of experiencing homelessness and or a housing instability. Therefore, their rent is more than 30% of their monthly income, and they need to meet our income requirements for each county. Those can be verified on our website. And one of the other things I'll say is, again, the income verifications go from county to county. So Kent, Newcastle, and Sussex County have different income requirements. So what do you need to apply? So as a landlord, you're going to need that W-9 form. You're going to need your direct deposit information. You can opt to be paid by check. If you opt to be paid by check, our checks are mailed from Texas. So it could take 2 to 3 weeks before you get that check. Our recommendation is always to enter that direct deposit information because we approve batches twice a week. I now approve them on Mondays and Thursdays. And so if you do the direct deposit option, you should be paid by the next week. If you choose check, it could take 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the mail, before you get that payment. We also need information regarding the property, and we're going to need a rent ledger. And if your tenant is past due, we'll need those past due rent statements, which is similar to the ledger. I know there's been confusion when maybe somebody reaches out to you and asks you for a past due rent statement, and the individual is recertifying and they're not past due. We're still looking for the actual ledger that kind of shows what payments have been made so that we can kind of see what the balance is. So what else is needed to apply? So for your tenants, we're going to need proof of identification. So we're going to need government ID. We've had cases where the tenant does not have an ID that matches the property address. In those cases, we're asking for the utility bill or a piece of official mail that recognizes the address that they're living at with their name. Income documents, we have been collecting the income attestation form, or they can submit their benefits letter, W-2 income, or anything like that. The documentation of benefits needs to be current. And then we're also going to need their rental documents, and we're asking for a copy of the lease. We also ask for a copy of the ledger. It is not required, but sometimes we have tenants that may have discrepancies in what they say they owe and what the landlord says they owe. So we offer that option for the tenant to be able to upload the ledger as well. So the application process is relatively seamless, although it may take some time to get through because we need to make sure by the end that we've gotten all of the documents that we need. Either the tenant or the landlord can submit the application. So for our landlords that are on this call, if you have a tenant that is either delinquent in rent or you think would be a good candidate for the program, you can submit an application from the landlord side. And similar to the email that you would get as the landlord when a tenant submits an application, the tenant would get an email that you had submitted an application, and they would need to go into the portal and provide their documents. Once that is completed, the application is sent for review. We have a two-step review process. We have an auditor review. That auditor is kind of looking at the whole application and making sure all of the documents are there. And then it goes to a supervisor approval, and that supervisor double checks those documents and makes sure that all of the payments that are being sent are correct. And that application is either approved or denied. So if you have questions, where can you go? So we have these biweekly webinars, and I would say these are pretty important. I think earlier on in the program, we didn't have as many folks attending these, but we find that they've been quite helpful because we walk through kind of some of best practices, which we can go over in a little bit, to get that application submitted and to get it, approved on that first go around. You can reach out to the call center at 866-935-0407. And I want to explain the call center a little bit because we've had some folks that have had some dissatisfaction with the answers they get from the call center. The call center is really there to answer general questions like, what is the status of my case? Has it been approved? Has it been denied? The call center can also help with specific questions related to how to submit that application or if they're having difficulty uploading a document. So those are some of the things that the call center can do. The call center can see that documents have been uploaded. What they can't see is if those documents are within the time frame that they should be. So the call center doesn't have access to looking at those documents due to privacy issues. So they can see potentially that a document is there, but they may not be able to open up that document and see that either the landlord or the tenant hasn't completed it correctly. And we're also working with community navigators, and those are statewide. Lori will put in the chat box the way that you can get in touch with a community navigator. We recommend community navigators all day, every day. Our community navigators are located throughout the state. There's no charge for the tenant to work with them, and that community navigator basically submits the full application for that tenant and keeps in touch with them when documents are needed. The auditor or the supervisor reaches directly out to the community navigator, and the navigator either goes to where that person is to get the documents or will work within the best way to get those documents quickly. The community navigators also have a direct line to a DSHA staff person, and that staff person can kind of push that application through to get it closed out. So statuses. So I'll go through the statuses relatively quickly. Approved for payment basically means that the application has been approved and that it is ready to be sent to the bank to be approved for the batch. Like I said, the batch payments were being done once per week. We did those on Wednesdays. We recognized that landlords needed that money as soon as possible. So we now do batch approvals twice a week. I do batch approvals on Mondays and Thursdays. So we're trying to get the money out there as fast as we can to the landlords. Paid status means that it's been paid and it has been sent to the bank and should be cleared. This should prompt that auto email to you with the details. Again, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, and for those of you that are jumping on now, there is an issue on the Yardi side with those auto emails being sent out. Marlena and I have been blowing up their emails, requesting status update as to what is going on with that and how soon that can be fixed. So we feel your pain and we are working through that. A denied case is primarily denied due to eligibility. We may have found that the tenant or the tenant doesn't qualify, or possibly there was an issue with the landlord documents that were submitted. Typically, we don't just deny a case. We typically do denied, no appeal allowed. That means that that case has been closed out and that no more work can be done on that case. But the tenant or the landlord can resubmit a new case if they need to. That applied status means that one or more parties has applied, whether it be the landlord or the tenant. And in progress means we're working on that case. If it goes to a call outreach completed status, that means that there was a document that wasn't received within the time frame. Typically, the time frame is 7 days. We'll do 3 requests in 7 days. And if we've not received it, we don't deny it, but we will move it to call outreach completed, which means that either the landlord or the tenant can still submit documents, but it's kind of just hanging out there until somebody does something. If you see that it's been assigned to DSHA auditor, you're going to need to contact DSHA staff. That means that we need some supplemental information that maybe the auditor or supervisor is not aware of. So program contacts, these are the contacts if you have to reach to an in-house staff person. This is my in-house team. I have several other folks. If you sit in on our meeting in 2 weeks, we'll be adding some other staff to this because we've brought on more internal staff to kind of address cases that need extra care. Brenda Stevenson is the person that you would reach out to if you had payment questions. Specifically, if you had pre-Yardi questions before September of 2021, she'd be able to assist you with finding out how much was paid for your tenants. Reem Alicia is our specialist that works on court cases. So she works on anything that's potentially with the courts or that's getting ready to go to eviction court. So she's the person that you would reach out to. Brenda also handles all of the larger landlords. Most of you that are on here that are a large landlord have probably worked with Brenda. Brenda has been with DSHA throughout this program and has been working on the DEHAP team for quite some time. And then anything else you can always send to me and I'll get you an answer as soon as possible. And if it's something that I can send to my team to get worked on, then we'll do that. So this is the reason why everybody's here today. You let me go through my spiel of, how to submit a case and all that good stuff. So we're here probably, I see a lot of you. I mean, there's 56 folks on here. Typically we have like maybe 7 or 8. So I know everybody's kind of here for this. So the program portal pause. So the portal is not closing forever. We are not out of money, okay? We're making some changes to the program. We're adjusting to some different funding source. The portal is pausing on Friday, September 9th at 4 p.m. Prior to that, you should be able to submit an application, a new one, or you should be able to have a tenant go in and do a recertification. The reason why we're doing the portal pause is because we're going to do some program modifications and we're shifting between our federal funding sources. In between that time, we also want to be able to make sure that we can work through all of the applications that have been submitted prior to the reopening of the portal, which will be in October. And how does that kind of affect you? So again, new applications will not be able to be submitted unless it's an emergency. So we will be working with our community navigators. If there is a tenant that is going to be evicted, if there is a tenant that has an imminent utility shutoff, they could contact a community navigator, and that navigator will have a conversation with them and review what their issue is. And then if necessary, they will ask them to wait. Or if they determine that it is an imminent eviction, or the utility is going to be shut off, they will submit a case on behalf of that tenant. Existing applications and payments will continue to be processed. So throughout the portal pause, if there is a case that's being worked on, the tenant and the landlord will still be able to access that case, upload documents, and do the same things that they were always able to do with that. So some of our modifications that we're talking about, so some of the changes that are coming that we will implement in October, we will be decreasing the income limit. So currently we're at 80% median income. So a family of 4 can be making around $84,000, a little under $85,000. We're going to shift that to 50% median income. So a family of 4 making a little under $53,000 would qualify. So there is a change to those income limits. We will be increasing documentation requirements. So throughout the last year or so of this program, tenants have been able to self-attest as to what their income is. We are going to go back to the way the program was when it officially started in 2020, when we required proof of income. So your tenants are going to have to upload their income forms. And we are aligning the program assistance amounts to meet market rate costs. So we'll be determining a fair market rent across the board, and that will be the maximum rent that we will pay. The rent won't be $2,000 any longer. It will be reduced. And so how can you prepare for this? So have conversations with your tenants, let them know that the program is going to be paused, and that if they are eligible, they should be checking our website to look at the income requirements to see if they're still going to be eligible. For you as landlords, you should definitely attend these biweekly phone calls, because we are going to be giving the most up-to-date information, and we will give you more specifics on the changes. And also, if you go to our website, you can sign up for email updates, as can your tenants. I highly recommend that, because when we make a change or if something else happens program-wise, an email gets sent up to everybody that has signed up for those emails. So the shift in funding, a lot of folks are saying, hey, you're out of money, it's shutting down, what's going on? You know, there's been a lot of rumors. We have not run out of money. We had 2 funding sources. We had ERA 1 and ERA 2. ERA 1 only allows us to pay cases through to the end of September 2022. So some of the landlords on this call may have noticed that for your tenants that are getting future rent, you're getting 2 checks. And the reason for that is, again, we pay 3 months of future rent. And with ERA 1, we can only pay rent through September of 2022. So for the rents that we would pay after that, October and November, we would have to switch that over to ERA 2. So what we've had to do is create secondary cases internally where we've paid ERA 2 for those 2 months. We are currently not paying any December rents until the new program opens up in October. So you may see tenants that are recertifying now that only get paid through till November. ERA rental assistance number 2, that expires in 2025. So one of the reasons why we made a shift to the program and we kind of changed the requirements is that we want to make sure that the funds that we have last through till 2025 or as close to that as we can get. And so we also want to make sure that we're really targeting individuals that need the assistance. So those are some of the reasons why we've made these changes. So managing our application volume. So we have approximately 5,000 in progress applications and about 1,100 new applications. So as I said before, the applications that are in progress, anything that is submitted prior to Friday the 9th at 4 o'clock will be reviewed. So it's not going to be denied. It's not going, there's nothing that's going to happen to it that wouldn't have happened to it before. We're still going to be reviewing those cases. And again, you're still going to have access to uploading documents, asking us questions, contacting the call center. DSHA has, in expectation of all of these cases and trying to get through the pipeline, you may see that you're getting emails from different auditors and supervisors. We work with Yardi auditors and supervisors, and with O'Brien supervisors and auditors. So we've increased the volume of folks that are working on the cases to get through these cases by the end of the portal pause. Again, landlords and tenants should continue to monitor your calls, texts, emails for communication. If I can tell you one thing, a great conversation to have with your tenant, if they're not, if you don't feel that they're kind of moving through the program quickly, have them log in and make sure if their cell phone number has changed, that they're updating their cell phone number. If they've, if that they're checking those emails. We've had quite a few cases, and it happens all the time, where we're continually reaching out to the tenant and the tenant's not returning our calls. We've even sent out text messages that say, hey, an auditor from our team is going to call you at this time. Please answer your phone. And again, both will still have access to the portal, so no changes to that. You will just not be able to submit a new case or recertify. So now questions and answers. I saw the chat like blowing up, and I was trying not to look because I'm one of those people that loses my train of thought. So
yes, so let me just pull everything back up. I am going to start with the questions that we received on the registration forms that were not answered throughout our presentation.
Sure.
So the first one is, can I get relief for my mortgage? I will go ahead and answer that. So we do have a Delaware mortgage relief program. It is separate from this DEHAP rental assistance program. And I'd be happy to place that website into the chat. The mortgage relief program launched this summer and very similar to DEHAP serves homeowners who have had a financial impact due to COVID-19.
Yeah, and Lori, I want to make sure that for our landlords on here that they know that it's for owner-occupied units, not for investment properties. So continue to submit for rental assistance through DEHAP. If you have mortgage assistance issues and you need it for your owner-occupied property, that's where you're going to go. If it's an investment property, then that program is not going to be able to assist you.
Okay. So I believe you answered this one, but we'll just reiterate it for everyone's knowledge. The court says the benefits will expire August 31st. Is that true?
So again, as we discussed, the program is not going away. We haven't run out of money. We're doing a portal pause to make the adjustments. So no, it is not going away. We've had conversations with all of the courts. They should be aware of this. We've had conversations with all of the voluntary legal service programs in the state as well as the utility companies. So we have made contact with as many folks as possible prior to making these decisions so that they are aware prior to the portal pause happening.
Okay. Can landlords apply for assistance when the renter does not pay?
So yes, again, as I said earlier, you can apply, but your tenant is going to have to be a part of the application process. If the tenant refuses to participate, then there's nothing that we can do on our end.
So in the application portal, how do I start another application or recertification?
So I'm not sure if that's from a tenant or from a landlord. My best recommendation would be to contact the call center, and they should be able to walk you through that.
Okay. Where can I find a denial reason?
So typically there is not a denial reason. There may be some documentation in the case. So you should be able to contact the call center and get that denial reason. If it's been denied and you can't get an answer, you can always send an email to either me or somebody on my team, and we can pull that and take a look at it.
Okay. Again, a reiteration question. Can DEHAP be used for utilities?
Yes.
And which kinds? Sorry.
Yeah. So any kind of metered service, we're not going to pay your your cable bill. We're not going to pay for your internet, but we'll pay for any metered service. And since this is a landlord call, let me talk about that a little bit. So we will pay utilities that are in the tenant's name, and we'll pay those utilities directly to the utility company. If you have a tenant and your lease requires the tenant to pay the utilities directly to either you or to a utility provider, and that utility is in your name as the landlord, then you must, if you need to get that paid, you need to include that on the ledger as an itemized payment. So for example, let's say you're submitting a ledger and it is for July, right? You'd put the rent of $1,000, and let's say their water bill or whatever other bill is associated that they're required to pay is $50. You do a line item for the rent, and then you do a line item for the utility, and then that utility would pay directly to you as the landlord. And then you could either, you're using that to pay the utility company directly or to reimburse yourself for you having to pay that because the tenant did not pay it.
Okay. How do I enter in a rent increase into an application that's already in progress?
So here's some best practices for our landlords. If there is any change to your rental agreement, my recommendation is to upload a letter with the ledger that states that there has been a change to the rental amount. Understanding that Delaware doesn't require you to renew leases and that you can move into a month-to-month lease once that lease expires. Typically, what we would look for that rent increase would be a newly signed lease with that rent increase, or the signed letter that the tenant and you have both signed with the agreed upon rent increase. And again, if you want to make sure that there's no questions about it, upload a letter with that ledger that says, please see, the signed letter with the rental increase.
Okay. During a recertification, why can't the newly assigned caseworkers see what's been previously submitted?
So I don't really know how to answer that question. So they have to go back to the older case to see what was submitted, but it also determines, like, if the tenant is recertifying and they don't recertify the correct way, it may not pull over all of their documents. And the other thing is, when they're recertifying, we are still requiring updated documents. So when that tenant recertifies it, if they do it the correct way, it drags over all of their documents. And so they're looking and they're saying, oh, all of my documents are there. There is a note in the portal that says, and it will tell you, please upload your most recent income. The income is only good for 90 days. So the tenant may see that all of the forms have been pulled over, but they're not uploading the most recent income form. Or if there's been a change to their lease, they haven't uploaded that. And potentially they may not have uploaded the letter that says there's been an increase to their rent.
Okay. Where can I find the current income limits?
So you can find those on our website. And as I said, the current income limits are 80% median income. They're on our website, and those are good through till the end of September. Again, our portal pause is happening. So anybody that has submitted prior to our portal pause date will be utilizing the 80% median income. New applications that are submitted in October will be at that 50% median income. And I'm anticipating that the new guidelines will be updated once we work through the current caseload.
Okay. If a landlord initiates the application, how long should a tenant expect it to take before they receive an email?
So if the email is entered incorrectly, they should be getting that email right away. What often happens is, I found this a lot, especially with like AOL or some of like those older email accounts. Some emails will automatically take that email because it's from a do not reply, and it puts it in their junk. So I always tell them to take a look in their junk. The other thing the tenant can do is they can log into the portal. They can enter their email address and then click on the forgot password option. And if you've entered, the landlord has entered the correct email address, it will resend an email to that tenant and allow them to set up a password and log into the portal.
Okay. Can you clarify how a landlord would start an application process?
So again, if you've not registered you would go to our website and you would log in and you would set up an account for yourself. So again, if you go to our website, there's instructions in there that will walk you through what you need to do. And if you have issues with that, you can contact the call center and they'll walk you through that as well.
Can a property manager become a community navigator to assist with applications?
No, because at this point we sent out an RFP. The community navigators selection was made, earlier in the year, and so that is no longer open as an option. But I will say what you can do is invite your tenant into your office and you can sit down with them and assist them with the application. You'd obviously they'd have to have access to their email and checking it, but you can assist them that way. My recommendation again is instead of, doing the work yourself, send them to a community navigator. Again, Lori put that in the chat. There's a list of them. They're statewide. Some of those navigators, work after hours. They may work weekends. They'll come to where the tenant lives, and or they can work via just cell phone where they have a cell phone number and that tenant might be taking pictures of all of the documents and submitting that to the navigator. So my recommendation is to send them directly to one of the navigators.
Okay. One of my property managers is no longer with the company. How do I remove her as an admin in the portal?
So I'm not sure. Send me an email and let me take a look at it. I wish I had a better answer, but sometimes I have to walk through how you're set up to see if it's something that I can walk you through or that I can do or that we need to put in a help ticket for it. So it just depends on how things are set up. Here's something I will say though. So we do see this happen quite often. My recommendation is that, if you're setting up as a new landlord or something of that nature, to have a generic email address that you set up for your DEHAP applications, because we've seen this happen quite often where somebody leaves and they're no longer there. So the other folks in the office don't have access to that individual's email and can't log in. So our recommendation is always to set up a generic email that, or several generic emails for each property site that you would have access to. And, you could potentially do that for the inception of the new program, or you can continue as you are now, whatever works best for you.
Okay.
Lori, can I say one other thing about property managers? So I think several of you have reached out and had some concerns that we're looking or asking for things that maybe we didn't before, and that will stay through till this ERA2 funding. We'll be doing a lot more review of applications. I'm sure everybody heard we had quite a bit of fraud that came through. We had applications that were submitted with fake EIN numbers, fake companies. And so we now do a TIN check. So if you're submitting an application, we are doing a couple different checks. We're doing a parcel search to make sure that the landlord matches the parcel search. We are also checking out that W-9 to make sure that the W-9 matches the owner of record. And we're doing that TIN check. If you are a property manager and you're managing the property specifically for our smaller property owners that may have a property manager, when you submit your lease, upload that property management agreement. That's going to save time from an auditor or supervisor reaching out to you. For our larger landlords that are completely frustrated because property management agreements have been requested, I feel your pain. I've heard you. And I had a call with Yardi today and I told him to cut it out. I'm going to send them a list of our larger landlords. And so hopefully that won't happen. If that is happening, feel free to send me an email. And I have no problem sending snarky emails if I have to.
Awesome. How long does an application sit in each status? For example, how long does an application sit in the applied status before it is placed in an urgent queue?
I'm sorry, my dog is barking. So that's hard to say. It kind of is dependent on what we're needing and who's reviewing it.
Okay. What do you recommend for an application? Yeah.
I'm sorry, real world problems working from home.
What do you recommend for an application that has been stuck in the in progress status?
So I recommend having a conversation with the tenant to find out if they've submitted everything. And then sending us an email, sending somebody on my team an email to kind of find out if there's something we can do to nudge that along.
Okay. Will landlords have to register their properties again when the new program starts?
No, they shouldn't have to register them again.
Okay. Where can we find what the current market rate rents are?
So when we say we're adjusting the market rent, what we're working on right now, Marlena and I, is looking statewide at what fair market rent is, and then we're going to come up with what we feel is going to assist as many people as possible. And so it'll be one amount that's statewide instead of going by county, and we would go with the highest amount. So that's something that we're still kind of internally working on with DSHA and some of our other folks in housing to kind of determine what the best rent number would be. So again, attend these calls, sign up for our emails because that information will be shared.
And then a follow-up question. If a rent is over the market rate, will the tenant be able to get assistance to cover the rent, to cover the rest themselves?
So not with the DEHAP program. There's other agencies that are out there. Again, my recommendation is once we set the fair market rent rates, my recommendation would be that you send that tenant to apply through a community navigator because those navigators probably have access to other agencies that could potentially assist. So for example, let's say we set the fair market rate at $1,500 a month and the tenant's rent was 1,800, that means that we would pay the 1,500 and the tenant would be responsible for paying the additional 300. Again, these are just numbers I'm making up. So that 300, if they didn't have the ability to pay it, they could potentially work through a navigator to figure out if there's other agencies that would be able to help with that.
Okay. So I have submitted my side of an application today. How long can I expect it to be processed, and will it be processed before the program before the program changes are implemented?
So I can't give any dates or time frames on things because again, I mean, I don't know if the person saying is a tenant or a landlord. This is a landlord call, so we're giving basic information about the landlord application process. And again, it depends on how long it takes the other party to log in and do their portion. And then once that's done, it can be assigned. So it's hard to give time frames because it's two parties working on that application together.
Okay. So a recertification was submitted in April that has not been worked on. Will this case be addressed during the program pause
It was submitted when?
in April?
So yeah, anything that's in the portal prior to us reopening will be worked through. So if it's been there since April, I would probably contact the call center to kind of find out what's going on with that. Or again, you could send my team an email to kind of find out what the status of that is and why it's been sitting, since April.
What can I do to update my email in the DEHAP portal? This is a landlord.
So that would be a call center. You need to call the call center, and that's something that I can't help with on my side because I think that once you enter that email address, that email is linked to all of the cases that have been submitted and paid, and information emails have been sent back and forth. So I think that's a Yardi call. So you'd have to contact the call center and ask them if they could do it on their side. So that's something that I would not have the ability to be able to do, or I don't think you can either.
Okay. How can we accelerate cases before a court date arrives and they have to be evicted?
So again, it's basically the same process. I mean, you're just going to submit that application. We don't consider a case that to be, we don't expedite cases because you're going to take them to court. We really are expediting cases that have a solid court date, not the 5-day letter. But again, my recommendation is if you have somebody that is in imminent danger of, you're sitting at that 5-day letter, or you're going to take them to court and you haven't yet, I would recommend, again, sending them to those community navigators, because those community navigators are going to have the ability to work with that tenant to get those documents submitted quickly. And then they have access to reaching out, whether it's to somebody on our team or one of the navigators, to see if that case can kind of move through quickly.
In this program, are we able to increase rent as we would normally do when a lease is up for renewal?
So yeah, the DEHAP program, we're just the engine that makes payments to whatever is on that lease and whatever is on that ledger. If we have a signed lease and we have a ledger that says that there is an amount due, and let's, again, as discussed, if that rent amount has changed, we would just need the documentation that the rent has increased, and that rent increase letter would need to be signed by the landlord and the tenant.
Are current applications grandfathered into the eligibility requirements now? For instance, if they qualified at 80% but do not qualify lower than that.
Yeah, so that's why we're kind of putting a pause on the portal to allow the staff to kind of work through all of the cases and get them all either approved or to denied if they're not eligible, prior to reopening and updating the income requirements. If we have carryover, then those folks we wouldn't hold them to the change in income. We would figure out how we would assign them to a specific team to get them worked through.
Okay. How are applications prioritized? For instance, tenants who owe $0 are getting help versus tenants who owe thousands are not.
Well, again, they're not prioritized in any sort of specific way. It probably depends on what team is working on it. You might have an auditor that works through their caseload. Let's say they get assigned 30 cases or 40 cases that week, and all of their cases were easy, all of the documents were there, so they're able to work through them quickly. You could have somebody that owes zero income, and that tenant has submitted everything on time. And so again, it kind of works towards whatever team or person's working on it and how quickly we get documents from both parties.
Do utility cost go towards the 2,000 maximum?
So currently we can pay over 2,000 if the rent is 2,000 and then the utilities go over that, we can pay that. Once the program reopens, the max rent will be the max rent. So if the maximum rent, again, if just using a number, if it was 1,500 or 1,600, and your rent was 1,600 and the utilities were an additional 200, we would only pay the max rent and not the additional utilities.
Our DEHAP team email address is listed somewhere on the website. They are not listed on the website. They are listed in a few of the slides in these PowerPoints, and those slides will be emailed out following this call. Next question, with rent increase letters, does it have to be a wet signature or can it be e-signed?
It can be e-signed.
Okay. What is a property manager agreement?
Well, if you're a property manager, I'm assuming you would probably know what that is. It just, if you're asking what it is, then my assumption is you're not a property manager. It's the agreement between two parties. For example, if I own a house and it's a house that I want to put a tenant in, but I don't want to take the time to collect rents or do repairs, then I would engage in an agreement with either a realtor or somebody that was in the business of managing properties. So when I do a parcel search, you'll see that Marva is the owner of the property. You'll see a property management agreement that's been uploaded that says, you know, company AB is managing the property for Marva. And so that would be the property management agreement between the owner and whatever entity is managing that property. We can pay a property management company with an EIN number. We would not pay a property manager that doesn't have an EIN number. So for example, if you have a friend that's managing your property for you and they submit a W-9 with their social security number, we would not pay that. It would have to be a business entity that we were paying, or we could pay the owner of record directly.
Okay, so another reinforcing question. Why are some applications approved before others?
Again, as I explained before, it just depends on how, who they're assigned to, what group, how fast that person's working through their pipeline. I've gotten, sometimes, I will grab cases and work on them, and I will have a case that I will call a tenant, for example, and I'm working on a tenant case. And I could be on that phone for 2 minutes and have a conversation and get what I need. Or there's times that I've been on the phone for an hour with that tenant, walking them through how to log onto their computer and how to, scan a document or how to take a picture with their cell phone. So again, it's really dependent on just how long it takes to work with the individuals and how big of a caseload you might have.
What if a resident has applied for the program but is moving out and still owes rent? Can we get the rent relief for that resident?
So that's really dependent on the resident, okay? So again, keep in mind, we're up to 18 months of payments. And what we won't pay is if you're evicting the tenant, we won't make a payment if you're going to do an eviction, because when you sign up for the program, you're basically stating that you're not going to evict that payment due to non-payment. If that tenant is going to move out, then the tenant can say to us, hey, I don't want to pay this landlord. I want to use the additional months of rent for my next place. We don't have any control over that. That's kind of the relationship between the landlord and tenant. And again, the tenant has to be a participant in this. And if a tenant calls us and asks us to, withdraw their case, then that's something that we, have to do. So again, it's kind of tenant based. So if they are moving out, I would recommend uploading a letter that says the tenant is moving out. For example, let's say they're moving out in November. And you would say, please don't pay future rent past November so that you don't have to return those funds to us.
Is there a time limit before I can send the tenant to court again after receiving a DEHAP payment?
So again, I can't answer that. I mean, on our side, if you have received payment, I don't anticipate that you would be evicting them due to non-payment if they're up to date, because we're paying 3 months of future rent unless they've maxed out. So if you're evicting for another reason, I mean, that's kind of between you and the courts and your attorney or your legal counsel. We wouldn't have anything to do with that because it would be due to not something other than non-payment or payments that we've made.
Okay. Um, when can we start using the DEHAP team emails that have been provided? So you'll have them after this call. They'll be listed on the slide. We ask that you remain respectful of our DEHAP team. They are very busy and very passionate about helping everyone. So we do ask for your patience when using these emails, and again, ask that you use them respectfully.
And Lori, I'll second that. If we, your first contact is going to be the call center. So you need to contact that call center first and see if they can address your issues. I have a team, there's 5 of us here. And what we're doing is we're working on cases that are extreme urgent cases. I mean, we have cases where the sheriff is on their way to lock the tenant out, and we're trying to get you guys paid right away. So those are kind of the cases. We have utility shutoffs where we're on the phone with utility companies trying to get utilities turned back on for your tenants. So be mindful of that, that our internal DSHA staff is typically for escalations when the call center has not been able to give you assistance.
How long after submitting documents can a tenant or landlord expect to hear from someone?
Again, I think I've answered that a couple times. I can't give a time frame. Again, it depends on caseload, and whether we have a full file and who's managing the case. And again, how many cases they have in that day and how long it takes them to kind of get through those caseloads.
Would there be a situation where you would pay the utility, for example, electric for Delmarva, but not the back rent?
So yeah, the tenant has the option to do a utility only case. So if the tenant submits a case just for utility, then we're just paying that utility. They can submit for rent only, utility only, or rent and utility.
Is DE COVID housing help where a tenant would look to see if they're eligible for income in COVID conditions? And the answer to that question is yes. You can go to rental assistance on the menu bar and then hit the Am I eligible tab. This will have the most up-to-date information on income eligibility and other requirements. Um, Once the program reopens with these new program changes, that same page will be updated with the new program details. Can we give the resident your emails to contact your team? You can, but the best way for a resident or tenant to get assistance is to go through one of the community navigators. And their phone numbers and hours, and may, I'll double check email addresses are on the website. But if you're looking for assistance for your residents, the best option is to use a community navigator. Okay, so I will check the Q&A.
And I will say that, we give these email addresses out specifically for in these landlord calls to assist you as the landlords. So keep in mind if you're giving, all of your tenants our email addresses, that takes away the time that we are able to address your cases. And again, our internal staff, most of us are assigned to working with the landlords to make sure that we can assist you with getting through, getting cases taken care of, figuring out payments, that sort of stuff. The call center kind of handles all of the tenant direct issues.
Okay, so I will give it a second to see if there's any final questions. If not, then we can go ahead and wrap up for today.
I'd like to say one thing. So if you do send emails to our staff, keep in mind that Monday is a holiday. And there are several of my staff that will be out tomorrow. So generally we try to email you back right away. But if you're sending us emails and not hearing back, we send an out of office email. But if you have an urgent question, you could potentially send that today or tomorrow. If it's something that's not so urgent, I would send it on Tuesday to make sure that you can get a quicker answer. I also want to thank all of our landlords. I mean, you guys have been so gracious to my team, and I know that there's been frustrations with the program. We appreciate you. Without, all of our landlords, this program, would not have been as successful as it has been. I don't know if you've seen some of the PR stuff that Lori's team's been putting out, but I believe we've helped over 15,000 tenants or families. And I don't off the top of my head know how much money we've put out there. Lori, didn't we get recognized like on like some sort of high level White House?
Yes, the White House's eviction prevention conference, Delaware was highlighted as one of the states that has kept eviction rates low using these DEHAP funds. So I just see one last question, and it's a good one. With the new program, will the portal change?
No, the portal will still be as fun as it has always been for all of you. So, and just to let you know, like if we will, again, I am really pushing this out there. We have another biweekly call next week. I mean, jump on the calls, Lori always sends out an invite. If you have questions ahead of time, ask, put those questions on there so that Lori can, give me a heads up because, sometimes like I don't want to be a deer in the headlight and be like, I'm not really sure how to answer that. So she tries to give me a heads up on questions. So I'll have as best an answer for you as possible. But I am here for you. If you have questions, if you have frustrations, always reach out to me and, I will do my best to address your questions. Know that we are doing the best that we can to work through. We have at any given time, we are working 7,000. At one time, we were at 12,000 daily cases that we're trying to navigate through. So know that we're doing the best that we can. I see a question about I have people pending that are not my tenants. Do you know why this would happen? So we've seen this happen quite often recently because there's been a lot of sale of properties or a tenant potentially has moved from one apartment complex to another and they've done a recert. And so they're doing a recert with the old landlord information. So it could be a mix of things, whether they're putting the incorrect information in for landlord or they're doing a recertification on, for somebody, a landlord that they're not living with any longer or not living at their unit any longer. For those, you can send an email and just like give me a couple case numbers and I'll do a little bit of research and see what we can figure out.
And may a tenant apply for more assistance after receiving assistance already in 2021?
Yeah, so we're up to 18 months and Lori and I have new language now. It's up to 18 months because there was some, communication where folks thought that they were approved for 18 months. And I again will say if you're a landlord, you're not approving people for 18 months because you're assuming they're going to be given an 18-month, that they're eligible for 18 months of payments. We can pay up to 18 months. Every 3 months, the individual has to recertify. As you see, we're changing program guidelines. So, somebody that could have been eligible before may not be eligible now. So be careful when you're, using the DEHAP program as a qualifier for somebody being able to afford the rent. But again, it's up to 18 months. And we won't pay past the 18 months. And you could potentially have a tenant that comes to you from another property that may have maxed out their 18 months already. So if you're, you can always ask that tenant if they've utilized it before, or you can ask us if they've utilized the program before.
Awesome. Well, it is now 4 o'clock, and as Marva said, thank you all for joining us. Invitation to the next landlord call will be sent out later or early next week. In the meantime, I have the follow-up email with the PowerPoint drafted right now, and I will hit send as soon as we end this meeting. The meeting recording, however, will be posted to the website early next week. Again, thank you for attending and have a great evening.